Hello everyone, welcome to Communityforce webinar. My name is Mehreen Mirza and I am going to facilitate this webinar and will be answering the questions that you may have during the Q&A break. Now we are waiting for others to join. So while we wait for everyone else to join the webinar, let us show you how you can use this webinar to ask questions and access the handouts. As you can see, there is a panel on the right-hand side of your screen with an arrow. Please use that arrow that is represented in an orange box to collapse or open the panel. Also, all of you will be put on mute in order to avoid any confusion during this presentation. Now, a copy of today's presentation is available in the handout section. You will see 2 handouts today instead of 1. Okay, so please click on each of the PDF copies by clicking on the title of the handouts as shown here. This handout or both of these handouts will contain the links of individual help guides, knowledge-based articles for each of the topics that we are covering today. You can use the question area to type in your questions and click on send or enter. We will receive your questions and answer them by typing them in or verbally during the Q&A break. If we miss answering any of your questions, we will send you a response via email after this webinar. Okay, let's see how many of our attendees have joined. Okay. Now, since most of you have joined, let us start with the brief of this training webinar. The topic for today is building fund criteria, basic as well as advanced. We have with us Christine Smith, who will be our trainer for today, who will go over all the relevant topics under today's webinar. The duration of this webinar is 1 hour. I will now pass over the mic to Christine to start the training. All yours, Christine. Thank you, everyone. Christine, I cannot hear you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. So let's go ahead and get started with our session today. So as Maureen mentioned, we are going to be reviewing how to manage your fund criteria to match your applicants to your funding source. And this is going to be on a one-to-many application process. So during the session, we're going to build criteria. And as we're doing this, we're going to be using that automated fund criteria process. The majority of our clients are now using that. So we're going to talk about how to build criteria using both the basic and advanced methods. And so if you're not using the automated fund criteria process, then that is something that if you would like to start using it after seeing today's presentation, then please contact support through a support ticket. And then we'll have someone look at your site and see what would be needed to get that activated on your site if you're not using it already. So like I said, we are going to be talking about building the basic and advanced methods and how to show your applicants additional sections of questions based on funds that they've been matched to. So we'll show you how once they've been matched to those funds from the criteria that you've built, then how do you get them to see just certain areas in the application that are pertaining to just that fund that they've been matched to that they need to complete now. So who's going to benefit from this webinar? This is going to be anyone who is an administrator on your site that is responsible for creating your new application forms from year to year, as well as cycle to cycle, to create that new application process that your applicants are going to want to apply to, as well as any of your administrators that are going to be building out that criteria that you need to match the funding sources. And the topics we're going to be talking about, this may be a short session today. It's going to be using automated fund criteria. We're going to talk about how that's activated and how to set that up and how to add your questions to your fund criteria. All that has to be done before you manage your criteria. And then we'll talk about managing the basic and advanced criteria. And then we'll take a quick break after we go through that and see if there's any questions. And then we'll finalize the session with using the matching funds criteria question, how to use that in your process. And then we'll take another quick break to see if there's any final questions at the end of the session. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to talk about is using the automated fund criteria. So this functionality is allows you to do an automated fund criteria. And what it does is, as you are assigning questions to your funding source, then it will then start building the criteria in the manage fund criteria section. And then what you need to do then is just to go in and then add any additional values for that specific question. They'll already be built in that fund criteria. You just need to add the additional values and all the values that are pertaining to those questions that are coming over. Now, this is a site setting. So once it's activated, it's going to be on all your applications on your site. So it's recommended that you do use this on a one-to-many application process. And that is when you have that one application with multiple scholarship funds tied to it, to that one application. And so this makes that matching of that criteria, building that criteria a little bit more efficient for you, so it's not so complicated when you go to build it. Now, the first step when you build the fund criteria is you're going to be assigning questions to that fund criteria. So first of all, let's go to the site and talk about how to activate that automated fund criteria on your site. So I'm just going to go to the site here. And it's here. If you're on your home page, when you log in as an admin, you're going to go to Administration. And then under Administration, you're going to look for Manage Site Settings. And then, like I said, that if you aren't using this right now and you do have active applications, you've already built funds, you are not even necessarily active, but you've used our site for years and you're not using this, then before you activate it, you will want to talk to a process review specialist and our support team just to make sure that everything will be okay. Because as soon as you activate this, it's going to activate it on all your application forms you have out there on the site already. So I'm going to go scroll down through the Manage Site Settings, and we're going to locate the site setting that allows you to use the automatic functionality. And so right here, you're going to see Enable Fund Criteria Automation. So once this is activated to yes, it will automate this functionality. And then what it does is in all of your questions, which we're going to go look at that here in a minute, all of your questions will then have where you can select that question to be added as criteria, and then you'll be able to tell the system which fund does this criteria question belong to. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the application now. So it's been activated, so now it's there. So I'm going to go home. And so then your next step is once it's activated, you need to go into your application form, and in your application form, activate all of the questions that need to be part of your fund criteria. Now, if you're already using this and you haven't activated this functionality, and this is why we want support to be involved in this, because when you activate it, it's supposed to, and it will automatically move all that data over, and it will activate all the questions for you. But I do want you to know that this is a functionality and that it's going to be doing that in the background. And so that's why we really want you, if you're not using this, to make sure that you get help from our support team prior to activating it so that nothing happens to your site. But if you're already using it, then it's already activated and you don't need to worry about that, of course. So then once you've activated it, all you need to do then is if a question is a fund criteria question, what you're going to do is just open it up. You're going to locate your questions. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to note, let's say that this is a question that's going to be used for fund criteria. So in my funds, I need to know what their immigration status is because only certain statuses are eligible for certain funds. So this is going to be a criteria question. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this question so that I can tell the system that this is a criteria question. And then what I do here is on this criteria question here is if I need to use it for fund criteria, I need to activate this use and fund criteria setup. So I need to mark this yes on this question. As soon as you mark it yes on this question, you're going to see the criteria fund here, and then it's going to show all your funds that have been linked to the application form, and then you just come here and select all the funds that are going to be using this specific question as criteria. So I would just go through and click, and then as you click them all, they start showing up there. And then you just click OK when you're done, and then be sure to click Save and Exit to save that information so that it stays on that question. So you would do that on all your questions prior to building your criteria if you haven't done so already. And then that's how you would add it to the question. So the next thing now we want to talk about is you've identified the automated, you've activated the automated functionality, you've told the system all the questions that are going to be used in fun criteria building. And now that all those questions are built, you can now go into the funds, and all those questions will be on those funds for you, and then you just need to build the values for those questions. So let's go ahead and talk about the building of the basic and the building of the advanced. There's two ways you can build criteria once you get to the manage criteria screen, which I'll get to here in a minute. So the basic is something that you can use if it's a very basic criteria. You don't need to use the advanced. If it's just a few questions and a few bits of logic, then go ahead and use the basic. It's easy. I'll show you how to do that one. I'll do an easy one if it's very basic. But then the advanced functionality allows you to get more advanced with your criteria building. So what I mean by advanced, if you have, and I'll show you a scenario as we go through this, multiple and ors and like multiple elements to build into your criteria, then you're going to want to use the advanced, because I find it much easier to use the advanced. And as we go through today's training, you'll see why. So when building fund criteria, of course, like we talked about, the first thing is to get the question, then you're going to go and manage your fund criteria and start building it. And so let's go ahead and do that here by going back to the site. And let's start building some criteria. Okay, so now to get to the criteria, of course, we're going to go to application settings. I'm in the home screen. I've selected my application that I need to select. And then once I select it, I'm going to go to application settings here. And then under application settings, I'm going to go over here. So that, remember, we've already assigned all the funds, and now we're ready to manage the funds criteria. So once we click on that manage funds criteria, this is where we build that criteria. And then over here is where the eligibility criteria, if you're like cloning an application, if this was a rollover process and you've cloned this application, all of that criteria is going to pull over and it'll be there available for you to use. But I'm going to go ahead and click in on this one. This is one we've built the criteria already. So let's say you're coming in fresh and you've activated your questions. And when you come here, all those questions that have been activated are going to show on this screen. And what it's going to show is, like, for instance, this one is the ethnic group. There would be one line for ethnic group. There'd be one line for gender. There'd be one for academic career. And then there'd be one for this GPA here. There would just be those lines. And then if you had multiple scenarios with this, or multiple values, so of course, if there's multiple values, then you would need to hit the duplicate button on that question, and then it would duplicate that line below it, and then you could add the second value. And I'll talk about this here in a minute, but I just want you to know that. So like this one, it was the ethnic group, but there was two ethnic groups that I needed to make sure the system matched to this too. So I hit duplicate, it created the second line. I came here, I put in my value, and then it was available there for me to complete that line. And then we'll talk about these and ors as well. And then I did the same with this one, academic career. I did a duplicate so that I could get another academic career line. But of course, this one you can kind of see if it's an undergraduate, it's going to be this. If it's a graduate, it's going to be this. So I had to do something a little different. I kind of had to move them around a little bit. Now we do have this move to, so when you're creating basic functionality, it has to be in a, you want to make sure that you group your groups together, which is what we have here. This is all one group. And so if you come in and you have to add something, then of course it's going to put it to the end. So you can always hit the move to, find what order number you want it to be, put that order number on the move to, and then it will allow you to move it to that position. Okay, so that's a new feature that we've added a little while ago, but it's been there for a little while. Okay, so let's talk about building criteria. So I'm going to pull up here, give me a minute here for it to pop up on my screen, some scenarios. And so you can kind of see how we built this out. So in this criteria, it's very basic. I don't have a whole lot to build. I don't have a lot of ifs, ands, or to deal with. So all I have is, with the criteria for this fund, is the applicant has to be eligible, has to be a Latin female, and if they're an undergraduate, they have to have a GPA of 2.5 or higher. But if they're a graduate, they have to have a GPA of 3.0 or higher. So how would we build this? So let me go over here. So remember that criteria. So the first thing, of course, is they have to be Latin. So I would have that ethnic question, which is this one. And so I built 2 lines because I had Hispanic Latin and a Mexican American were both considered Latin criteria if my ethnic. So I want to make sure both of those get picked up. So you're going to see here I do equals and then the criteria, and that's still group 1. Or, so I'm saying they can be either Hispanic or Latino, or it can equal Mexican American and they're eligible as well. So anytime it's within the same question, we're using the or factor because it's this or this for this value. Okay, now this is one group. So that was for the ethnic. So now I need to go to, they have to be a female. So this is another question. So I'm changing questions. So as I change questions, I'm going to use this and. So what I'm saying is, and in order to be eligible for this criteria, they have to be a female. And so I'm going to put the gender value that they have to meet in order to be eligible for this scholarship. And so this is just one question. I only have one value for that question. And now I'm going to put and, because I'm switching questions, and they also have to. Now notice here, we're going to do something a little different. So this one is the same question, but if they answer this question a specific way, if they answer it as undergraduate, then the GPA has to be greater than 2.4. However, in the academic career question, if they answer graduate, then their GPA has to be greater than 2.99. So you'll notice here we created a grouping, and this group is group number 3. It's all the same group. And so what we're doing is we have 2 different questions. So the first one is equals undergraduate, and then I'm changing questions. So I'm using and they have to be greater than 2.4. Okay. Then I'm also saying, or if they have the same question and they answer it graduate, then it has to be and greater than 2.99. So that's basic criteria. That's kind of a way to show you how you do that. So if it's the same question, but there's a certain way to a certain leader question that has to be answered a certain way, if they answered this question a certain way, then you have to make sure that that whole group, if there's multiple, because this one has multiple replies, this whole group is grouped together. But you're going to notice when I switched questions, I didn't do like this one. When I'm switching from one criteria to another, I'm using and, but this one, it's undergraduate and this is the reply for this, or then it's this and this is the reply. And then of course, once you're done building this, you want to hit save and exit to build that. So that's the basic criteria. It's very simple. It's just as you change questions, you do an and or just that grouping there. And we do have this handout that I'm showing you here with this scenario and kind of how we broke it down. We do have this as a handout today, so make sure you get this because this will help you understand the and or functionalities and when to group, that sort of thing. on the basic. So now let's talk about advanced criteria. So I'm going to switch funds here. I'm going to go to a fund that I have advanced criteria built on it. So you can see here, this one's only 7 lines. So now with an advanced criteria, I'm going to go out here, exit, and go into my next fund. This one, view eligibility criteria. Okay, so here is, this said basic, so now we're changing the toggle to advanced. When you change it to advanced, your questions are still going to be there, just like they were before, but you're not going to have that and or functionality over here. You're going to build the and or at the bottom. So what's nice about the advanced is all you need to do is just plug in your questions and plug in your values. That's it. You don't need to worry about the ands and the ors and when that falls. That's going to come at the bottom of the page. When we're done, we're going to create this whole string of logic that needs to be applicable. So I have this in this document. There's 65 lines. So you can see here I have like multiple financial information values. I have academic values. I have academic plans that make them eligible. So there's multiple codes that make them eligible based on their majors. Enrollment, GPA. You can see I have multiple questions. So all I did is created those questions, set them as fund criteria for this fund. And then when I came in here, I had one question of each. So I had like one county question. Then I just hit duplicate, 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 and plugged in all the counties that made them eligible and did that with all the additional questions that are out there. Now, let me pull the scenario over here. And we're going to break it down on this paper first. And I want you to see the string and how we're going to break it down. Let's see if I can minimize this and get it a little bit here. See if we can get it side by side here. You can get the whole picture. Move this over. Okay. Yes. So here's our scenario. We have the candidates for the scholarship have to be a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident who's currently enrolled in the pursuit of a degree related to business. So that's why I had all those degrees, because all of those were business related degrees at the grade level of a junior or senior with a financial need. An overall cumulative undergraduate GPA of at least 2.5. So if it's an undergraduate, a GPA of at least 2.5, or an overall cumulative graduate GPA of at least 3.0, and be available to work 10 to 15 hours per week as a paid internship at the time of the award. Students must be enrolled at full-time status and must be residing in specific counties of Nebraska or Iowa. So the counties of Nebraska and Iowa, if they were residing in a specific county, so I need to know how my application's built. So I know I have two questions. I had a resident state, and then I had residing in counties. I had also another state question that had a dependency on it, and it was dependent on however they answered a state, then they only got that county list. So that's why I had a couple of different questions in here. So I have a resident state and an address state of Nebraska or Iowa, and then residing in the counties. And then so this one, they could be only, so there was a Cass County, Nebraska, and there was a Cass County, Iowa, and there was also a Washington County, Nebraska, and a Washington County, Iowa. However, they were only eligible for Cass County, Nebraska, and then all these counties, and then Washington County, Nebraska, and all these counties. The Cass County and the Washington County, if they chose Iowa as their state, then they wouldn't be eligible if they were Cass County or Washington, because they live in those counties within the state of Iowa. So that's a little complex. So let's go down, and so you can see kind of how we broke this out. for this first part. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is the citizenship, a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident. So what I'm saying, I'm bracketing this off because this is one group. Each group is bracketed. So kind of get your algebra out again. And we're going to build a string. And so it's going to be on this citizenship question. So here's my numbers. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are my citizen values. So if they answered any of these values, they would be eligible. So that's why I have in my string question number 1, question number 2, or question number 3, or question number 4, or question number 5. This is all of these on the citizen question. If they answered 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 would make them eligible based on that citizenship. So that's that. So that's kind of like in the basic when we had those two, it was this value or this value, and then we went to an and scenario. So now we're saying, so this is your citizenship, and for them to be eligible, we're going to go to 6 and 7. So what's 6 and 7 over here? 6 and 7 is the state residence. So they have to be 6 or 7, so they have to be a resident of the state of Nebraska. So there's my Nebraska, and there's my Iowa state. So now I've got that. So they can be either Nebraska or Iowa. And now I got a long string, so I'm going to start it with a bracket, and then I'm going to bracket this one with a double bracket because I'm going to build a string within a string. So there's one bracket, and then this bracket, and then this bracket is going to be just for this string. Okay? So now I have, so they have to be Nebraska and Iowa, and if the state equals Nebraska, which is number 8, then it can also, it has to be 8 and 10 equals Cass County, or 8 and 16. So 16 is Washington County. So what I'm telling it is it has to, it has to be 8 and 10 or 8 and 16. That's the first value for this group. So this is, we're thinking about what makes them eligible based on the state and the county that they choose. So I had to pull this out because this was a special scenario because this was that Cass in Washington and it was only for Nebraska. So I'm doing this and this, or this and this makes them eligible. And then I'm doing another or, and so there's another bracket here. Wait a second, I'm starting another string, and then within the string I'm going to have some brackets. So now I'm saying or it can be 8, again that's Nebraska, or 9. So now we're saying it can be Nebraska or Iowa, and then if it's Nebraska or Iowa, then the and is the next question, and then it can be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, or 19. So what we did is we said if it's Nebraska and 10 or 8 and 16, they're eligible. Or if it's 8 and 9 that they've selected, 8 or 9, then it has to be one of these values. And then we have to close all of our brackets out to make sure that that whole string has been closed out. So this, you can see the complexity of this. You wouldn't be able to do this in a basic because it wouldn't work. But in the advanced, it does, but you want to make sure you get your opening and closing of your brackets in here as well. And on this sheet, it's not at the very bottom here. I have all of this in the long string like it looks like on the page. This is just kind of breaking it out per eligibility criteria so that you can kind of see it a little bit better. Okay, so that's that. So now we've got this open bracket and closed bracket. Everything else, this is open, that's closing, that's open, and that's closing. So everything's closed. And now we're going to move to the next scenario. So it's going to be and. So the next question then over here is the Academic Information Guild. So it's just one question and there was only one value. So all they have to do is and, they have to answer no. And then this question here, there's 2 replies that are making them eligible, 21 and 22. So it's going to be 21 or 22. And now we have another scenario here. So now this is the scenario for if they're an undergraduate, then they have to have a GPA of 2.5 5 or higher. And in my application for this scenario, I didn't do it in the other one, but I wanted to do it this one. There's actually 2 different questions that we're looking at the GPAs. We have 2 GPA questions. One's the transfer and one's the cumulative. So if it was an undergraduate, which is row 23, then we're saying if they choose undergraduate, we're going to do 2 scenarios. So it can be 23 and 24. So that it can be 23 and 24 with greater than 2.49, or it can be 23 and 25. So that's 23 again with the other question I needed to pull in there. Okay, so that makes them eligible. Or it can be 26, which is graduate, and 27, or it can be 26 and 28. So you can notice here I have an open and closed bracket. This is one group because I'm telling the system this is that one eligibility, and this is the grouping that needs to be done and with these questions to make them eligible for that specific scenario. And now I'm done with this grouping. I've closed it out with my brackets, and I'm going to go down to my next question. Planning to enroll in this program is yes. So it's just one reply. You can see I just have one for that question. So I'm just going to do and 29, and the next scenario is going to be all of these, so 30. So these are those business related degrees. So I have multiple ones out there. So you can see from 30 all the way down to 62, they're all degrees. So I'm telling the system they're eligible if they picked this one, they're eligible if they picked this one, they're eligible if they pick this one. So you can see here, we did and then we just did one bracket, and all we have to do is it has to be 30 or 31 or any of those. We're just doing or all the way through that scenario and then closing the bracket. So hopefully you see that. Okay, and then we're going to the next criteria. So we have a couple more. We have 63. So 63 is just a single question. Internship interest, they have to say yes to that question. So we can just say and 63. And then this one there's 2 different replies. There's 2 different questions. So if they answered this question at 20,000, or they can answer this question at 20,000. We can make that one group because it's not and or, it's just they can answer this question or this question with these values. And then here is the breakdown, and then the picture of this long scenario and how it was built for you to have so that you can kind of review it and kind of see how we built that out for you and when we did the ands and ors. Okay, so that's a lot to take in. So we're going to go ahead and stop here and take a quick break and answer any questions that have come in from Maureen. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Christine. Okay, we do have a few questions. Okay, so the first question, just a second, let me go back. So with the automated fund criteria, is it best to set these up even when the applications are closed? Yes. Preferably, we'd advise you to do it on your applications that are not currently live. The reason we say that is because as and when you're adding questions to the criteria and your applicants are applying, they will start showing up as matching scholarships. And if you want to keep it hidden, it's all right, you can keep it hidden. But if the applicants are able to see it while you're adding those criteria, the applicants will start seeing, and it's going to cause some confusion. That is probably the only reason why we suggest you to add the criteria before your application goes live. Also, you won't be able to test it thoroughly, right? With criteria especially, we always suggest our clients to have at least 2 weeks time for internal testing. So that is why it is our advice to do it on closed applications or applications before you go live. Any additions there, Christine, that you'd like to make?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. All right. Also, now this is a question that says, if we have a look at, can we go back to the basic criteria, Christine? What Jonna is saying is, at the end of a criteria, this is, yeah, if we go to the basic one, at the last, on the last criteria, some of the criteria might not have an and or an or. Yeah. So would that make a difference? Yeah, as Christine is showing. On the last one, so ideally it should not make a difference. But if it is, in this case, Jonna, you're facing trouble, reach out to us and our team can have a look at it. Please specify the scholarship or the fund that you're facing the issue with. Any additions, Christine, that you want to make? Because Jonna is facing some issues when they're not adding an and or an or on the
No.
last criteria. Yeah.
So no, you don't need anything on this last one because the and or information is always pertaining to the next row below it. So there's not going to be anything under here, so this can be blank. There's nothing else in addition to it. I would say don't have anything. Keep it blank because the system, sometimes I have seen it, and that might be where John is referring to. If you put an and, it's looking for something and it can't find it, or an or, it's looking, well, what's my next parameter, and it's not able to find it. So just leave this last line blank, and it should be okay for you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Christine. Okay, Jonna. So it does not. It does the opposite of what. Okay. So all right. So Jonna, can I touch base with you again? We'll schedule a call this week, and I'll bring in my team, the support team also, so we can help you directly on the call and we can address all of the funds where you're facing that issue. Thank you so much, Jonna. Thank you, Christine. A few more questions that we have is, eligible scholarships are not displaying under the matching fund eligibility question. Okay, this is the question setup that Christine spoke as a second step, right? Once you enable the fund criteria, and now you're going in to associate your questions with the funds. And those questions that you have associated with your application do not show up. Why is that happening? Because the application's deadline date is probably in the future. That is the reason it's not showing up. So the start date of the application has to be in the current date range, please. Don't publish the application, but just make sure that the start date has to be in the current date range for you to be able to see those funds that you need to associate with your questions. I think we've already covered that. Where do I, okay. Unable to view the eligible applicant system alert. The system is giving you an alert that the reporting database has to be updated. Yes, the funding, the eligible, the criteria is at the back end associated with the reporting aspect of the system. So when you get this, the system alert, you can go ahead on the manage report screen, update your reporting database. If it still does not show up any matching or eligible applicants, please open a ticket with us on Zendesk, reach out to us and let us know that you're coming across this issue, and even though you've updated the reporting database, it's not showing up any eligible applicants. So let us know and we'll help you out. Probably it needs to be refreshed from the back end. Okay. I think I've typed in most of the answers. Christine, I'm good. I think we can proceed further. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, good. Okay. So now let's get into, now that we've built the criteria. Now I did see there was a question about the ands and ors and the brackets. Did you want me to address that as well? I see John, I had a question about that, so I can address that for her if she.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, sorry, Christine. I missed that question. Yeah, I was
Okay.
just typing in another answer for her.
That's
Please
okay.
go
So
ahead,
I'm gonna,
Christine.
yeah.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go to the eligibility criteria and kind of explain it. So that was all in this scenario, this one that has all these extra brackets, this was all one grouping. So we have the open grouping here, and it might be easier if we go down here so you can kind of see. Where's the long string? Okay, this one here, and it starts. Okay, so here we have several groups. So we have the beginning of the group, which is going to be bracketed. And then I have this bracket here, which is starting with this 8 and 10. So this is the scenario. So the scenario here, this 8 and 10 is built within the group of this bracket here. So it's 8 and 10 or 8 and 16. Or, so think of it as like up here. So this is its own group, okay? So I'm saying it can be 8 and 10 or 8 and 16, or so picture these two brackets here are the same as these two brackets right here. It's just this scenario with 8 can be 8 and 10 or 8 and 16, or, and then I have a bracket because this bracket here is the same as this being within one of these brackets here. I hope that helps answer you a little bit. Okay, so then it says or. So now I'm creating another subgrouping within this. So I have a bracket, then this bracket, and then I have or 8 and 9 and 11, 12. So that's a subgrouping within this grouping, okay? So now that I had this bracket and this bracket, that kind of closes it all out, but then this kind of closes it and gives it a nice happy little bow on the top of the package. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Jana, as to why we did all these brackets. So we had a bracket, and then this one is a group, and then this is a group within a group. And so that's why there was 3 to the front of this, because this was the starting string of that group. And then this was another group within this same group, and then I needed to close it out and then close out the whole thing together. Okay, it's kind of when you have that groups within a groups, you need to do a parentheses to contain the whole thing. And then this contains just the scenario. Okay, so like this one here, we just had the one bracket and then the brackets with this, and then it closed it out. And the same with this one, we have a bracket here and a bracket here. So just think of a string, like an algebra type string. When you have this and this, you're creating your figures within the brackets, and then that figure that comes within the brackets then gets added or subtracted or whatever to the other brackets within it. Okay. Okay, so that's that. So now let's go on. Hopefully that answers your question, and we'll close this, move this out of my way here. And now that we've got the fund criteria built, the system will start matching applicants to their scholarships. So a lot of you have the scenario where once they've been matched to a scholarship, then they have essays that they might need to complete, or maybe that scholarship requires an additional form to be completed, or maybe there's specific letters of recommendation needed for just that specific scholarship. So how do you do that? Well, that's where this matching fund eligibility question comes into play. And so the matching fund eligibility question is built into the application form. So I'm going to go show you in my application how I have that built. If I can get back to my site, where did my site go? There it is. Now let's expand that and go back into the application build. And so based on that criteria that was just built, the managed fund eligibility question, which we put it in a separate section because they have to actually save this question, and then once they save the question, then it'll start matching it and hiding and showing the other element. So we always do this in a different section. So we have this fund eligibility section here, and this is looking at, I'll preview it here. So what it's doing is it's looking at all the questions that the applicant has answered. It's looking at that fund criteria that we just built, and then determining which funds the applicant will be eligible for. And then it's going to give them the list. Of course, this is the back end, so I don't have a list, but it's going to give them a list of those scholarships that they've been matched to. So once they click save on this section, they have to save this question, save this section. That's why we keep it here. Then what it'll do is it'll start opening other questions based on their eligibility. So they see what they're eligible for, they save the section, they close the section, and then what the question does is it then builds that question in the systems, the reply values are then built. Once they save it, that's what builds the values. That's what's the reply values for that question. So then what you can do is, so for instance, here I have an essay section. I can go into my essay section, and I have this scholarship, and only if they've been matched to this scholarship do I want them to see this essay. So I build conditional logic that says that fund eligibility section, that eligible funds question, that's the matching funds eligibility question. So when you build it, you choose the question type, matching funds eligibility, and then it creates this eligible funds question. And then I say, hide this question if it doesn't say MCF. If they have not been matched, is what you're thinking, does not contain MCF scholarship. Because as soon as I save that question, it's going to put them, if they match to the MFC scholarship, it's going to put them on that scholarship as being eligible for that scholarship. And then if they match to that scholarship, then they'll see this essay. So that's how you can use that question. The same with this one. You can see if it doesn't have that question, then they do not get this essay question to complete. So you can do that. That's one way to do it. That's on the individual questions. Now on the sections, you're going to do a little different. Questions you're hiding, sections you're saying to show. So on this section here, if they match to specific scholarships, on certain scholarships, I need an academic or merit recommendation. So what I do over here is I do the conditional logic on the section, and here, whoops, I picked the wrong one here. I went this one, financial need. There's only certain ones that need financial need. I apologize. And only these are the funds that have a financial need eligibility. So in the fund eligibility question, if the eligible fund question contains the value, then this makes them eligible. So on the questions I'm saying hide, so we do does not contain. On the sections we're saying show this section if it contains this, all of these scholarships, and then they should see this section. So that's how that fund eligibility question is very helpful in that scenario, because we have a lot of clients that are like, well, I want them to match, but then I don't want them to get certain questions or certain sections unless they've matched to that fund. And so that's how you do that with that matching fund eligibility question. So I think that's it for my topics for today. So I will go ahead and see if there's any other questions that came in. Maureen.
Sorry, Christine. Sorry. I thought I was speaking with myself unmuted. Okay. There is a question that says, how do I test my criteria report? That is, if you set up the criteria. Like I mentioned previously, that you need to test. Make sure before you go live, you have to test your criteria. How are you going to test that? You will need to apply as a test applicant. Okay. Answer the questions that are associated with your funds that you've assigned to the criteria. That is where you will be able to see if the questions have been answered correctly. And then on the fund eligibility section, if you've placed that question in the fund eligibility question, you should be able to see all the funds that the applicant matches. That is your test applicant matches. You can use your personal email address or a very general email address for your team that probably everyone can have access to, or probably create 1, 2, or 3 applicants, test applicant accounts, and then apply to your application and test those scenarios. You can continue changing the answers and keep testing. And then another question is, when using a filter in criteria reports, what is the difference between equals versus contains? Now, contains is if you want to include the value on the field that you've added. It is not very specific, but if you use equals, it gives you specific answers. That is, if you're using, there could be a male and female, right? Under gender, the question is gender, male or female. Now, if you notice, male is also present in the word female. In this case, if you're going to use contains, then both the genders will start showing up. The criteria will show up all the matching applicants. Whoever has selected female also will show up in that criteria. So in this case, it is better for you, or it is advisable for you to use equals. So you can keep that differentiation between genders. Also, similar county names, you can change that as well. Just make sure that the values that you have entered in the field are correctly placed. And that's the difference between contains and equals. If you know the words are going to be very different, then please use contains. I think I've already covered eligible applicants, system alert. Okay, I think I've answered. Let me check back, Christine, once again. Okay. Okay, we can't test ours this way because the only people that have access to. Oh, so how do we test from a student perspective? Students login info. All right, Jana, just a second, Jana. Let me read that question, because if you have, if you're going to not allow a certain specific type of question, sorry, applicants to answer, we cannot test ours this way. Okay. The students login info. Jana, in this case, you can create an applicant account from the main dashboard, from the login screen, create a user account, and then you can apply as a test applicant. Or because you are the admin, you also have access to creating applicants. From the administration tab, setup user screen, you can create a test applicant account and apply to the applicant. Or you can also send that applicant a test, create the user accounts from the setup user screen, send that applicant, the test applicant, an application invitation while your application is closed. So if you send an application invitation, your applicant does not really have to come in and apply. We're talking about test applicants. So in case everyone else is wondering, what we're talking about is you might have some integration in place. Your site could have an integration in place that limits access for the applicants to apply. And in this case, all of you admins are only having the admin access. You're not going to have access to the applicant. So that is the reason why you can create an applicant account, a test applicant account from the administration dashboard, and send an application invitation to yourself. Okay. Can I create this and use my staff email? It has to be a very generic email, Jana, in that case, because the moment you use your staff's email address, it is going to uh, start going back to your site, right? With the integration in place. So if you can use a Gmail account or a Hotmail or whatever you're using, an AOL account, you can use that. When we schedule the call with you, Jana, we'll touch base on this idea also. Okay. Okay. But if it's preferable for you not to use your uh, site domain, in that case, that will cause a lot of confusion because it will create an app ID in your case. I think I have answered all the other questions, Jana. I will be reaching out to you and scheduling a call with you. If anyone else has questions, I think we're good.
Okay.
Christine? Yep. I think we've answered all the questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. Okay, so that brings us to the close of today's session. So of course, please make sure you get the handout so you can get the resources that have the access, the quick access to the guides on Zendesk. So if you do the click here's, that will take you to those specific guides. Then, of course, we appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedules today to attend our session. And if you do have any additional questions that you might want to meet with a client support specialist, feel free to do so by entering a support ticket in Zendesk, or you can click here to have access to our calendar and schedule a time as well. So again, thank you, everyone, and everyone enjoy their week, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.